I still have mine in my coat pocket. Okay. Let's call the meeting back to order. And before we do the Pledge of Allegiance, can we observe a moment of silence? We lost a TPS employee last week, who was a dear friend of mine, Pat Logan Pat Blue, excuse me, at Topeka High School passed away. And just for 1 minute, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, at this time, as we say our pledge, we're going to turn it over to our scholar. Then we'll learn a little bit about you after you do the pledge. We'll turn it over to you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, Miss Meyer, you did such a wonderful job. Everyone here has been excited to meet you ever since they saw you on the news and heard about your activism. So I'm going to turn it over to Adeline Meyer. She's at Jardine Elementary, and I'm sorry, her principal might want to say a comment, her principal, and then we'll turn it over to Adeline Meyer and her family.
Hi, Miss Meyer.
Hi, Adeline. You did such a great job. Thank you, Dr. Anderson, and our Board of Education. Thank you for inviting our scholar, Adeline Meyer, tonight to do the pledge. She is a fantastic scholar. She's a third grader. Her dad, Jason, does work in our building. He helped open Jardine Elementary. We worked together at Landon Middle School, and he came over to join me on the ride over at Jardine. And so their family is just fantastic. Her mom, Sarah, is an active member of our PTO. They are just both cheerleaders of public education as well as Jardine Elementary. Her brother, Bennett, is also a scholar in our building. He's a fifth grader. I see him on the screen too. But yes, the Meyer family is fantastic. Adeline and Bennett are fantastic scholars in our building. And I cannot wait for you to hear from her about all of her activism and all of the things that she has been up to. And I will turn it right back on over to her. Great job, Adeline. I'm super proud of you. You did great.
Thank you.
So Adeline, can you share with those that are listening what you did recently? You helped make a big change. Can you remind everybody what you did and what was the change that you helped make?
I contacted my favorite cookie company because I found out they were using palm oil from the orangutans forest with and it's this, they're cutting down their habitat to grow room for the palm oil plants. And when I was in second grade on remote learning, my second grade teacher had a lesson about this. There was a video, and once I watched it, it was super sad. People cutting down orangutans' forests and I
It's okay. So what did you start doing after you learned about palm oil? Did you start checking all the ingredients?
I started to check all the ingredients.
And what did you find?
That my favorite cookie company uses palm oil. So I contacted them and said, can you please change your ingredients?
Right. And you heard back?
And I heard back.
What did they say? That's okay. So they were going to work on changing the ingredients to make it more environmentally friendly.
You are amazing. Oh my goodness. I'm going to turn this over to our school board and our board president, who might have some questions just about you and your experience at school. I'll turn it over to Reverend Williams.
Any comments?
I take it she has aspirations of being a chemist.
What do you want to do when you grow up?
I want to be the president.
Okay.
You should have capacity.
Yeah.
So what gave you the courage to contact a huge company and ask them to change their ingredients? What gave you that courage?
The fact that I have a dog at home and that I love nature and animals. I do that for nature and animals.
Well, you know that other students your age may not have taken that action. So we are looking at you and we're just so extraordinarily proud of you for taking that action and then actually getting it done. That is so hard. And here you've done it at such a young age. You are making me feel like I have not done enough in life yet. So I need to pick up my game. I also want to congratulate your parents for having a 21-year-old already.
Very true.
So listening to you speak with her, it's wonderful to hear you talk with her and encourage her. Adeline, I hope you know you have really good parents. I don't think it's a secret.
Of course I do.
It was quite impressive when she discovered her favorite cookies had palm oil. She was pretty distraught, and I said, so what do you want to do? Do you want to still eat the cookies? And she said, I want to eat the cookie, but I'm going to contact the company and tell them they need to stop putting that in there. Just completely on her own. It was like that was happening. So
Yep, and it did.
Can you share with us exactly, or kind of what you said to them to make them change their mind? Your words have power.
did you? It's been a little bit, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a little bit.
It was just very heartfelt, and you told them why it was so important to you.
Yep. I just did it from my heart.
And that's why it happened. I'm sure that's exactly why it happened, because it was from your heart and you touched their hearts. So thank you for doing that, because you've made children all over the United States that love that same cookie healthier. You are truly a hero, and we appreciate you, and we appreciate your teachers and your parents for encouraging you to step out and do something so courageous and important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna pull up Miss Meyer's certificate. So this will be delivered to you tomorrow, and the certificate says, Topeka Public Schools District recognizes Adeline Meyer for your service at the November 18th, 2021 Board of Education meeting, presenting the Pledge of Allegiance. Again, we're so proud of you and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. This time we entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I move the board approve the agenda as presented.
It's been moved. Is there a second? The second, any discussion? Seeing none, ready for the vote.
Vote is open. All votes are in and the motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Dr. Anderson, school highlights.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson-Betts will begin with the highlight on the Topeka Public Schools Foundation Sports Park and Highlander investment update. Ms. Johnson-Betts.
Good evening. I'm hoping the rest of my team are there someplace. Mr. Gowan, have you let in Barbara Duncan, James Walden, and Nick Newkirk by any chance?
We're here.
Oh,
we're here.
wonderful. Okay, wonderful. Mr. Chair and board members and staff, excuse me, I've been sick with a cold, so if I sound kind of funny, that's it. I'm under the weather just a little bit. But it is our pleasure as the Topeka Public Schools Foundation. We have the charge and oversight of the sports park and giving an annual update to the Board of Education. So I have with me tonight our team. There are 4 of us from the team here, including Dr. Mickelson. And we have a very capable and professional team that I'm very proud to be able to serve with. Our chair is Mr. Nick Newkirk, who is CEO and investment advisor of Proactive Capital Management, Inc. And he will lead the report in just a minute. Our professional wealth management partners are Barbara Duncan, who is a partner and senior wealth advisor, and James Walden, who is a partner and chief investment officer of Clayton Wealth Partners. And so together we'll give you an update. While we're mandated to give you an update on the sports park, we're also this evening going to give you some information about the Highlander Fund, which is the fund that serves Highland Park High students, and to give you just a little information about the education fund for the Topeka Public Schools Foundation. With that, Mr. Newkirk, I'll ask you to give the presentation.
First page, please. Next page. As of 10/31, the Sports Park Fund, the value of that fund was $2,273,633. You look at the segment allocation box there, you can see that the current allocation is 10% in cash, 55% in domestic equities, 12% in domestic fixed income, 21% in international equities, and 3% in international fixed income. Under activity summary, if you go 3 columns over there, you'll see the last 12 months. So going back for 1 year here approximately, you can see that the beginning value was $1,971,230.97, with withdrawals of $230,133.38, with a net gain on the value of $534,933.87. $32,668.21, which gives us that current value of $2,273,776.81. If you look at since inception, the column clear to the right, you'll see that the beginning value, which was zero, but the additions in there are 999,502.61. And so you can see what the growth of that over the inception of the fund. You go down to performance. Look at the third column over, says last 12 months. You can see that the last, looking back 1 year, the performance of that is 27.9% compared to the policy benchmark of 26.5%. Go clear over to the right and you'll say since inception, you have 8.57 and outperforming the policy benchmark of 8.09. The education fund, see the value as of 10/31 of 21, $405,378. Allocation, pretty similar to the other fund. Cash, 11%. Domestic equities, 40%. Domestic fixed income, 27%. International equities, 15%. And international fixed income of 7%. Under activity summary, go to the third column of 12 months, looking back 1 year, had a beginning balance of $341.18. $18.77. Had a contribution of $10,278.40 and withdrawals of $12,568.86 for a net gain of $66,690.29. If you go down to performance and go over to the third column of the last 12 months, you can see that the current return is 19.62%, beating the benchmark of 18.17. Since inception, clear to the right, 6.78 compared to the benchmark of 6.37. Pam said the education fund, the Highlander, you can see that the current balance of that is $828,956. The allocation, 11% cash, 40% domestic equities, 27% domestic fixed income, 15% international equities, and 7% international fixed income. Under the activity summary, if you go to the third column, last 12 months, you can see that the beginning value is $723,978.97. Had a withdrawal of $34,843.37 for a net gain of $139,909.20. Under performance, last 12 months, you can see that the performance of that is 19.48, beating the benchmark of 18.17. And since inception, 8.56 compared to the benchmark of 9.34. Questions?
Sure. Where does the money come from?
Team?
There are a number Are you talking about the Highlander Fund, Dr. Bonebreak, or education, or which fund are you?
Both.
The Highlander Fund was initiated with a 600, and I believe it was a $50,000 contribution from A&E when there was the
Undercover High?
yeah, undercover high at Highland Park High School. The withdrawals are that we have been very good in terms of investing because we started out with 600,000 and have now given about 30 scholarships to Highland Park High students. There's some place within live, so they get $500 a semester as long as they're in school and meet the criteria. So that was the initial fund for the Highlander. In terms of the sports park, it started with, there were people that gave money to the sports park for naming rights. There were other people that just gave donations to the sports park. So we have continually invested those sports park dollars. This is the account that we give only disperse funds when the Board of Education comes to us and says that you want to buy new sports turf or whatever. In terms of for the public education fund, we do a number of things like the fundraiser that you participated in, the golf tournament. We do a major saver kind of event. We have the community breakfast. So there is a various pots of money for the different kinds of funds that we have that we continually look at. But honestly, for the sports park, the main kind of growth in that you're seeing is that we've got a good wealth management plan. We did our benchmarks well. We look at this thing quarterly. We have good partners, community businessmen, men and women, that's their game, that they look at financial investments and are guiding and leading us to make sure that we're on the mark and not losing dollars. I think Mr. Walden would share with me that some of this has been that investments are just going fairly well. At some point, we're probably not going to see that same amount of growth, but while we're on the tide, we're enjoying it. We think we're doing all that we can to make sure that we're responsibly handling the money that you've entrusted to us. Did that answer?
I was going to say thank you, Ms. Johnson-Betts, for the full presentation, and my apologies, Dr. Bonebreak, did that answer that question?
Yeah. I thought Hummer Sports Park was older than 2013. They kept saying inception, but.
I'll add in, since it was our report, 2013 is when Clayton Wealth Partners started managing the fund. So the since 2013 number is when we're reporting on performance. We don't have prior to that. So sorry for the confusion on that.
And it speaks to the good management that you've had, Ms. Duncan. So thank you for sharing that and clarifying. That is our one highlight. I'll turn it back over to Reverend Williams and Dr. Mickelson.
Reverend Williams, if I could just make one comment. As somebody who's been on this committee for better part of 8 years, I think, and was stepping off, just to share with you those responsibilities. So this committee meets quarterly, typically the month after the quarter ends. So January, April, July, October. We used to meet personally, and we meet over the lunch hour. And I like that we're meeting over Zoom now because we've got people that are from a lot of financial institutions. And I just sit there and listen and glean things from Barbara and James because they're experts. And Barbara will go over a summary of this, and James will kind of give an economist view of where we're headed for the market and what we should do and what and not do. So it's interesting to me to listen. So if you have an interest in this, then I encourage you to serve on this committee. And Ms. Johnson-Betts runs a nice committee and keeps people well informed. And Nick has been the president or the chair of the committee the last little bit, and it rotates through people. So if you're interested, this would be a good committee to serve on. So but thank you for your service. And I hope to see you down the road some more. So.
Thank you, Dr. Mickelson. We've really enjoyed having you on that committee. You will be missed, but we hope to see you. We're going to say so long, not goodbye. We'll see you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Johnson Betts. With that highlight being shared, we have 2 proclamations, and I see those folks on the screen waiting to read their proclamation. So we're excited to turn it over to our administrators, our staff, as well as our school psychologists. So starting with Ms. Kara Schutz, we'll turn it over to her. It is the School Psychology Awareness Week proclamation. As we bring that proclamation up, Ms. Schutz oversees the school psychologist. She manages the crisis team, and she's a pretty exceptional person. We did a video this week and highlighted her whole team and her as well. I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Schutz, to start reading the proclamation. And can you briefly tell how many school psychologists do we have for the board to know that?
We have 15 full-time and then 2 contractors that help us a few additional days a week. And then we have 1 new one joining in January, so we will be fully staffed at that point in time. So a great team with working with students in our district. So thank you very much, board, for taking the time to acknowledge our profession this week. So the proclamation says, proclamation of Topeka United School District number 501, School Psychology Awareness Week, November 8th through 12th of 2021. Whereas all children and youth learn best when they are healthy, supported, and receive an education that enables them to thrive academically, socially, and emotionally. And whereas school psychologists are specially trained to foster and deliver a continuum of mental health services in school and in the community. And whereas the role of the school psychologist play helps to nurture students so that they can thrive in both personal and academic achievement, growth and resilience, as well as a sense of belonging and well-being. And whereas the focus of the school psychologist is to build connections between students and school communities that enhance their skills, improve their outlooks, and set them up to strive in everything they do. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education of Unified School District number 501, Topeka, Kansas, does proclaim the week of November 8th through 12th of 2021 as the annual observance of School Psychology Awareness Week.
Thank you, Ms. Schutz. Any questions for Ms. Schutz before we move to our next American Education Week proclamation?
Stuart Campbell.
Thank you so much for everything you do. Could you walk me through like a day in the life of a school psych?
I can try, but it is different every single day. We have lots of team meetings collaborating with our GEI teams, our administration teams, mental health teams. We do a lot of testing for special education evaluations to see if students qualify for special education services, and then do reevaluations every 3 years. Also responding to crisis calls or individual counseling with students. Kind of looks a little different at elementary versus secondary. Elementary is more heavy focused on the evaluation. Secondary is more counseling and individual students meeting with them.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like a lot and very important. Thanks.
And to think that just 15 people do that across the district, managing all of our students. Again, she is exceptional. If anyone would like to learn more about just the work in general, go to our social media for parents and others, and like her video and repost her video as we highlight our school psychologists. Thank you again, Ms. Schutz.
Thank you very much.
Our next proclamation, okay, we often celebrate our principals and our Teacher Appreciation Week. Well, this is American Education Week. And we thought, who haven't we brought in? Well, tomorrow under American Education Week is the substitute appreciation of the American Education Week. So we have one of our substitutes, Miss Marie Carter, who used to work in human resources, and she just missed us so much that she continues to substitute for us just about every day. And then we thought about, instead of a principal, an assistant principal will be great to hear from today. So Mr. Haig is the assistant principal. They're going to start off reading the proclamation, and then we're going to round that off with just a principal for the day, which was part of the American Education Week experience. Mrs. Carter and Mr. Haig, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Anderson, and to the board for the opportunity to share with the board a proclamation for American Education Week. This proclamation reads, Topeka Unified School District number 501, American Education Week, November 14th through 20th, 2021. Whereas Public schools are the backbone of our democracy, providing young people with the tools they need to maintain our nation's precious values of freedom, civility, and equality. And whereas by equipping young Americans with both practical skills and broader intellectual abilities, schools give them hope for and access to a productive future. And
whereas education employees, be they custodians or teachers, bus drivers or librarians, work tirelessly to serve our children and communities with care and professionalism. And whereas schools are community linchpins, bringing together adults and children, educators and volunteers, business leaders and elected officials in a common enterprise. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education of Unified School District number 501, Topeka, Kansas, does proclaim the week of November 14th through 20th, 2021 as the annual observance of American Education Week.
Thank you both. We're going to click the link on the video of American Education Week, and some of these board members got a chance to celebrate this week, American Education Week. And so you got a chance to see some of this up close. If you came into the board meeting just before this, you saw a rolling slideshow of photos. I'll turn it over. Is this photos or is it video? Oh, it's video.
My inspirational teacher is Miss Mignano, my physics teacher. She's impacted me the most. I've had her for 3 years now, and you can just really tell how passionate and caring she is about teaching. So she has a saying, and that's if you look at like a pothole in front of you and you're focusing on the pothole and trying to miss it, if you focus on the pothole, you're always going to hit it, but if you focus on what's around it, you'll be able to get around it. Like if we focus on like how hard we think the problem is and how we don't think we're going to be able to do it, we won't be able to. But if we focus on like different ways around it, we'll always make it past.
I chose Mr. Berkland because he actually does treat us like a family, and he doesn't treat us any different than the other students. Actually, last week was his birthday, so we threw a big, like a surprise party for him, and it was really cool. He was really thankful for that too. Students really do appreciate what teachers do.
I would say just really take time and be intentional about how you care for the kids. Maybe going out of your way and asking them, how their day was, telling them that you love them, that you're thinking about them, pushing them in a positive way. I feel like that would be impactful for the students and both teachers. Just keep fighting, keep pushing, continue to keep going on. It has been hard, trust me, I know firsthand that it's been hard, but I believe that 501 has a wonderful set of staff under the direction of Dr. Anderson who have that fighting quality to push through whatever challenges we may have. So just keep fighting, keep pushing, and continue to be the one.
Thank you for sharing that. That was the teacher voice in there. I'm going to turn it over to the board if they have questions. I believe Ms. Carter may have another engagement to get to, so we'll just turn it over to the board. If you have any questions for our former employee / substitute in every capacity, or from Mr. Haig, one of our long-term assistant principals at Jardine Middle.
Comments?
I have known Ms. Carter for a long time. So great to see that you're still helping with, in our schools, and we're very appreciative of you. I have not yet met you, Mr. Hagan. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about yourself.
Definitely. This is my 25th year in Topeka Public Schools as an educator. I actually am a product of Topeka Public Schools myself, McClure, French, and Topeka West. Started at Williams Element Magnet School as a teacher, worked my way into Jardine Middle School as an educator, and then moved my way up into administration my first year at Scott Magnet School, and then came back home here to Jardine, where I've been ever since, and that's having a blast.
Thank you, Mr. Haig. I saw somewhere in our TPS social media that one of our teachers credited you for the reason why she became a teacher. So thank you. Thank you for your inspiration.
You're very welcome. I saw that. Young Miss Charlotte was one of my 5th grade students years ago. Still see her, contact her. She's awesome.
Mr. Hay kind of sold himself a little short when he was at Williams. He wore many hats at Williams. He was food service, bus driver, teacher, all around, and a great person.
Thank you, Reverend Williams. I was their first greenhouse lab teacher when we opened the building several years ago. So I got to teach Reverend Williams' daughter as a fourth grader, so it was awesome.
That's great.
As we conclude that highlight, Mrs. Carter is also the ambassador for our United Way. In addition to being a substitute, she's an administrative professional at the front office in many different places. Ms. Carter, do you want to share how much you helped us raise? She actually runs through the district at every school, collects the United Way funds, reports it, and it is really our ambassador for United Way.
Well, I've got to tell you, I have fun doing United Way, and we've got some fierce competitors in our district, but we challenged ourselves to do at least 10% over what we did last year. We did 10.45%. And so we're going to challenge ourselves again next year to go up another 10% and include more student activities to make sure we reach that goal. But I've enjoyed every minute of it. We're going to do it for another year. We've done it for 4 years so far, but I get to see all the students, visit with the staff, and in addition to USD 501, I get to also assist with Shawnee Heights, Washburn Rural, and various businesses around the city.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. I shared at the principals meeting, we were going to report out on United Way, and I had all the principals come together and said, oh, I forgot to tell Ms. Carter. Well, she was in the front office working anyway. She just jumped on the computer and gave her report. So we thank you for substituting and for helping in so many other ways. That concludes our highlights, and I'll turn it back over to Reverend Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Are there any public comments?
We have none.
Okay. That moves us to disposition of business by consent. Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. President, I move the board approve the items of by consent as presented and authorized by the board president or superintendent to sign the special project and purchasing contracts for and on behalf of the board.
Is there a second? Second, any discussion? Hearing none, we're ready for the vote.
Vote is open. All votes are in and the motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Lister. This time we're at the superintendent's report. Dr. Anderson.
All right. Well, thank you. As we got off of the American Education Week, I mentioned it was principal for the day, and it's not on this sheet, but we do want to mention that as we end the American Education Week, we had a communications team that traveled throughout the district and made the videos, collected the photos. I believe they're on with us this evening. Mr. Garrett, Ms. Fleck-Talley, Mr. Williams, and of course, Dr. Gray is sitting in the room. Those individuals are on. Dr. Gray, any comments you want to make before we move forward to the rest of the agenda? I've never seen Mr. Garrett without a tie. Oh my. Hello there, Mr. Garrett. And can you share a little bit about Principal for the Day and what part you played, sir, as we had several media outlets through the full team, through Dr. Gray and team, but do you want to share an item or two, sir?
Sure. So today I just went around we all kind of divided up the schools because we had so many willing community members to help be a principal. So we all kind of just went to each school and only got to stay for a second, but snap a few pictures and just kind of see and catch up with what all the principals were doing.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. Dr. Gray, any other comments that you'd like to make, sir, as we move forward from Principal of the Day? And I know we have those pictures that are up. We'll bring it up at the very end as I move forward to the Land Acknowledgement.
Yes, Dr. Anderson. Again, I want to just thank this amazing team. Again, they make everything so easy here in Topeka Public Schools.
Thank you, team. Ms. Fleck-Talley sent out all the items. Ms. Nordic, who's not in this room right now, but she delivered the lunches and ordered the lunches for schools to pick those up. And then our videographer, who's made some amazing videos, came those straight out of college, Mr. Williams. We thank this entire team for all that you've done. Speaking of photos, really quickly, right before the board meeting started, the board members may have missed it, but this was a scrolling slide, and it's several different photos, but that's the first page of photos. So if you click on our website, website, if you look on our social media, you'll see photos from across the district, state representatives, board members, and many others from various companies with Principal for the Day. So we thank everyone that has participated, and most importantly, we thank the communications team for making it all happen so smoothly. As we move into our next item, our Native American Land Acknowledgement is next. The board over the last 3 meetings have heard about the Land Acknowledgement, starting with what it is, and then the Equity Council looked at the Land Acknowledgement. I'm going to introduce you to one of our staff members from Meadows. And Mrs. Wabansi is a member of the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation and the member of the Kickapoo tribe in Kansas. She is an American Indian, and I will turn it over to her to read the land acknowledgement. If there is a question at the end, feel free to ask that. She's a rather silent person. She's very quiet if you ever walk in the Meadows. But just an amazing person to be in the presence of. I'll turn it over to Ms. Wabansi.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Thank you, board members. The Topeka Public Schools District Land Acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the Topeka Public Schools is historically home to the Native nations of the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee. Additionally, other Native nations such as the Delaware, Wyandot, and Shawnee temporarily moved through these lands in the 1800s. Furthermore, Kansas is the current home of 4 federally recognized Native nations: the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo tribe in Kansas, the Iowa tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and the Sacafoc Nation of Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska. This acknowledgement is meant to be a living document as we continue to learn and understand the history of the land that Topeka Public Schools currently utilizes. This acknowledgement will be revised and updated as appropriate.
Thank you so much for reading, as well as for all that you do for our students. I'll turn it over to Reverend Williams if there's a question on this particular land acknowledgement before we move forward to our next item.
Any questions, comments? Ms. Bowley.
Hello, friend. How are you?
Hello. Fine.
Could you help us understand this land acknowledgement, what it means to the tribes around us, and the heart of it that we have tried to come to the table with?
Come to the table to acknowledge that the lands that the different nations have that we were on before other people came to that. Most of the 4 federally recognized tribes here now, most of our tribes, we were not here. The Prairie Band, we originated up in the Great Lakes, Michigan, and then we were forced to move through different ways down to the current, or to the reservation, which is north of here, about 25 miles in Mayetta. And even in that time, our each of the reservations started out larger, and then they have become smaller. So, it's great that the board has recognized that this is an important thing to do, to recognize the different nations the nations of students that are at Topeka Public Schools. We have several different Indian tribes that are represented throughout the district.
I have so little knowledge of how tribes feel about the land, but I know the land is considered very much a part of your soul and existence, and that nature and land is so important to you, and it's something you feel very strongly about preserving and taking care of, because it always gives back. So I appreciate you being here to accept this acknowledgement. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to do this. I know Dr. Anderson didn't say my first name, so I will say my first name. I'm Ajani Wabansi, and I am a K-5 counselor at Meadows and have been with the district for 16 years now.
You did that better than I could have said it, that's for sure. Well, again, thank you so much for being here, and I'll turn it back to Reverend Williams and Mr. Munoz.
Ms. Wabunsey, thank you very much for being here with us. I think this is an important first step, but I'm also looking to figure out what might, as Ms. Boley mentioned, I find myself lacking enough information, and I wonder if there's a way where some of us on the board might be open to learning more and establishing a foundation for a relationship with some of the tribes. And I think this is definitely needed. I also think the relationship building with some of the tribes might be an important step and I'd be open to try and figure out when we might be able to, I visit with individuals and just to learn more about our tribes that exist here. I think it's sorely needed. And my hope is that as we begin to develop these relationships with some of our tribes, that it might have an impact on us as we look at policies and we take into account those Native students and the role that we might play in bringing attention to some of the issues there.
I think reaching out to our tribes are made up of a tribal council. You have the chairperson and different chair people that you could reach out to, the different tribal members that they're tribal members that are part of our governing board. Because if you didn't know, we are each of these four federal recognized tribes, we are sovereign nations. So we are made up of, we have our own constitution, we have our own laws that we have to do. So we are a nation within a nation. And to become, there's different things to be able to be an enrolled member of a tribe. Dr. Anderson named my two tribes, but I'm only an enrolled member of the Prairie Band Potawatomi. So that's what the policies that I vote on are there. Though I'm also affiliated with the Kickapoo tribe. And most of these tribes also have an education department that you probably could reach out to and talk with them. So just reaching out to them, because we have these tribes here, but we have several students there are different nations within our district.
And that's the big piece, the number of students that we have. So when we talk about inclusivity in spirit and in action, that's part of this. So through the Equity Council and through the work with both K-State and the person that you've already met, the Commissioner for the Kansas Department of Native American Affairs, we'll be working to look at what's the next step. This is the first step, but what are some next steps in relationship building? So I'm so glad you mentioned that, Mr. Munoz, and we look forward to the future steps to come in better service to all of our students. Thank you again, Ms. Wabunsey, and have a wonderful end of the week and a holiday week next week. As we transition to our next and final item, Dr. Kips. Thank you. Dr. Kipp's going to talk about graduation rates. He's going to tell you a little bit about how each school is doing for our comprehensive schools, and then share kind of the overall rate. Dr. Kipp, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm going to briefly go over our graduation rates. Just for background, the 2021 rates they're really not finalized until late October for all Kansas districts, just to allow for summer school graduates and some kids finishing up credits at the beginning of the year. So with that, we'll dive into it. Okay, so this first graph is essentially several years, I want to say maybe 15 years of district graduation rates. The state does just recognize the 4-year rate as the official graduation rate. And as you can see, we had a slight dip from 81.7 to 80.2. If we superimpose the 5-year on there, you can see that we were actually at 83.2. Now that, doesn't really count in our graduation accreditation and other metrics, but we think it's important to highlight that these kids are finishing. Next slide. This is a kind of a breakdown of the four-year rate by gender. This is kind of mirrors the national rates of females out graduating males. My wife tells me because they're smarter, but next slide. Now, this is the big three in terms of race that we have for our district, the Black, Hispanic, and white groups. And as you can see, in 2018 was kind of a seminal year where we essentially closed the gap between the three predominant races in our district. The next 3 years and up till 2021, that gap has remained somewhat close and tight, but still a little variability with the Hispanic and African American and white groups. We also look at four-year grad rate by subgroup. On the very first bar chart, you can kind of see the last 5 years of the free lunch graduation rates, and then special ed, and finally ELL. Now, I do want to highlight that special ed, I'm only showing 5 years here, but 78.5 is the highest special ed graduation rate in the past 10 years. So it's quite an impressive feat, in the midst of a pandemic, that they have the highest graduation rate since the inception of the formula. Next slide. Now we're starting to dive into the big schools. Topeka High is the first one. They had a very slight decrease from 91.5 to 91.2, still well above the state average of 88%. And if we superimpose the 5-year rate, they actually had a 93.2 graduation rate. Next slide. Topeka West had another record year with 95.4, and I will reiterate that the state average is 88% graduation rate. 95.4 for a 4-year rate is pretty impressive. And with their 5-year rate, those kids are graduating at a 95.5% rate, which is very impressive.
The interesting thing about Topeka West, you'll see in 2015, they had an 86% rate. So to be at 95 or above is pretty remarkable for any school, to be quite honest. And certainly, again, 5-year or 4-year.
Yeah, and to sustain that level is impressive as well. Highland Park is starting to turn the corner and getting back up there. Pretty big jump from last year at 77.7, and they're turning the tide up to 83.5. But watch what happens when you put on the 5-year rate. It's 80.2. Okay, I thought it was a little higher, but 83.5 for a 4-year rate is still, getting very close to the state averages.
How can the 5-year rate be lower than the 4-year rate?
It depends on the cohort. It just depends on the size of the cohort. You'll see that throughout the history, especially in 2014, 2015, 2016. It just depends. In this particular 2021 class, they graduated more kids in the 4-year rate than they did in the 5-year rate. So when you think of the graduation rate, we're talking about 4 years of kids. And so it's really contingent upon that makeup of that cohort. Does that answer your question?
I guess it does. I ask this question every year because it never still makes sense to me how we could have, so our overall district graduation rate was 80.2, is that right?
Yep.
Earlier slide. And we don't have a school that's less, Topeka High is 91, Topeka West 95, and Highland Park's 83. So mathematically, how do you get a lower cumulative?
When he gets to the other schools, I might explain that when we
But
get.
they're so small. They don't have.
And they are small. Yes,
number
we're
of-
going to turn slide.
Cap City has, how many seniors does Cap City have? It doesn't, I'm guessing that number is so minuscule relative to the grand total that it shouldn't sway the number. And I struggle to mathematically how to figure this out because it still doesn't make sense to me.
Dr. Kip?
Well, I can address that question now. Yeah, I mean, you have to include Cap City, Hope Street, and Avondale West as well.
Hope Street's 88%. So
Yep.
Hope Street's north of 80.2 also. So
why don't we finish the slides and then I can kind of dive into that a little bit more mathematically.
I struggle with this math every year and I still don't understand it, I guess.
So the next two schools, these are our schools of opportunity. Of course, you know Avondale West. For those that don't know what Avondale West is, that's listening in. When students get out of the JDC, they go to Avondale West as an opportunity to have some academic makeup kinds of things, as well as mental health support. So these students might be very far behind when they leave JDC. If they've been in a juvenile correctional facility for an extended period, they may even be at an elementary level, although JDC is for middle and high school students. So keep that in mind. Additionally, students who've had out of school, instead of doing out of school about 5 years ago, that's when we opened up Avondale West, rather than having them running around the community. It really is a place for students who have anger issues and other kinds of issues to be able to have a space to go and to get mental health counseling. That gives you a perspective of Avondale West. So these are students that have academic challenges. We're going to go to these next two slides. Hope Street, however, you did want to show that 86% is their 5-year, which will further make this a challenge to explain for you, for Dr. Mickelson. So the 88% for 4-year and 86% for 5-year. We're excited, though, on that note, Dr. Mickelson, from T-High to Hope Street, the incredible graduation rate. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Kip.
Yep. And so, yeah, we kind of buzzed through Hope Street, but they're definitely up there in the 80s. Cap City, you know, like you mentioned, Dr. Mickelson, there is such variability because of the lower class sizes. And typically, you know, Cap City being 100% special ed, those kids can actually stay till they're 21. So there could be a 5-year rate. There's not really a 6-year rate, but those kids can definitely remain until they finish their credits. Now, when
basically we're penalized on the 4-year rate, so that you understand that if the student stays to their 21, it means they did not graduate in 4 years. They are still in school. We allow them to stay to their 21. They still graduate and get a diploma, but we cannot count them in our 4-year rate. So because you do see a lower rate doesn't necessarily mean these students dropped out. It might mean that they're in the program to stay to their 21 and get work study, which we think is a good thing. So when they changed the stop counting the 5-year rate, we still elected to give students the option to stay to their 21. So we want to explain that. Dr. Kip, as you tell the number, can you also share how many students does this represent, the numbers that you're about to share?
For Cap City or?
Yes, for Cap City, what's the 5-year and the 4-year for those listening in?
For Cap City, the 4-year graduation rate was 63.4. And I'm not sure the raw numbers behind that. Maybe Dr. Mickelson, I can grab all the raw numbers and kind of explain the cohort model outside of this meeting.
What's the 5-year?
5-year rate is 81.3. So, you know, it does speak to the phenomenon that Cap City kiddos are taking a little longer, you know, 5 years. But of those 5-year cohorts, I mean, 81.3 are graduating. So these are just some of the highlights I wanted to point out. We did have 800 students graduate last year, or 2021. Again, there was a slight decrease in our overall rate. Highest graduation rate for Hope Street and Topeka West in over 10 years. And also, as I mentioned, the special education peak over the past 10 years. And then we continue to close that racial achievement gap amongst Black, Hispanic, and white students, plus or minus 4%.
Can you remind what last year's graduation rate was? I see you have the decrease, but you don't have what it went from into to. It was.
Yeah, I believe it was 80, 81, and we'd have to go back to that first slide. It's a lot of numbers here. 81.7. And we always got to kind of frame it with the 4-year rate because that's what, you know, the state kind of counts. But, you know, potentially what's bringing down the district average, given the 3 comprehensive schools, are some of these ancillary, the Hope Streets, the Cap Cities, the Avondales. Depending on the end counts, the number of kids in each facility, it could be enough to move that average down.
Thank you, Dr. Kip. We did not include, I didn't see Avondale West in here, and they have also very low numbers. So on the Avondale West piece, the graduation rate, I believe, was in the 20% range. Am I correct in that?
Yes, ma'am. I think it was 21% graduation rate. Yeah.
And many of those students, again, as they move out of JDC, if they're a Topeka Public School student, then we do have to accept them. They used to go directly back to their homeschool high school. We thought it would be better if they went to an intermediate place, and it allowed us to see how the high school's rate really was with those students at another location being able to get caught up. We'll turn it over to the board.
Ms. Bowley?
So I'm not a numbers person, so you can help me here. When we have students that we help get to graduation at the age of 21, what happens to those students? How are they calculated, or are they calculated at all? Or are they a nick against our graduation rate? Is that what's changing?
That is correct. They shy away from the term dropout and call them non-graduates. We are graduating them, but within that 4-year parameter, the state doesn't recognize anything anymore. They used to, whichever one was higher, like if the 5th grade or the 5-year rate was higher than the 4, we would count that one. But now with the accreditation, that solely is the only thing is they focus on the 4-year rate, which could inherently be somewhat biased against some of these alternative sites. The Hope Street doesn't get kids that are credit, most of them are kind of credit deficient. So they really work hard with them to get credit recovery. But for some kids, it's just not possible in 4 years.
And so the state awards districts on graduation rates, and that's only on the 4 years.
Correct.
So districts such as our own that are trying to recover credits and help students graduate even up to the age of 21, it would be very hard to get those awards to compete against districts that don't have these alternative schools. Am I correct on that?
I would agree with everything you just said.
And so when we don't get those awards, we should understand that we're helping probably more students than the ones that are getting those awards, because we are helping the students that could be on the fringe of education come back into education and find their graduation.
Absolutely.
Well, good for us.
That does conclude our report. As we continue to move forward, Reverend Williams, unless there are any other questions that you may have, that does conclude our graduation report as we continue to move forward. I've asked Dr. Kidd to continue to show the 5-year, because 5 years ago, they actually did acknowledge that, or 6 years ago when it first started. And then 5 years ago, they stopped. So I think every public school that is large, that's an urban school, would also be challenged. The higher the poverty rate, the longer it may take. And the more special education students you have, particularly if you're going to opt into programs like work study and 21 and giving students jobs, the more likely you will have students that take longer than 4 years. So that would be Topeka Public Schools, as well as any other district our size or larger that would have a high free lunch population. So it's a continued piece that we advocate to look at equity when we look through that space. But we will continue to give you the 5-year, even if it's not recognized at the state level.
Lord Campbell.
Yeah. So a comment and a question. So I have, as of today, I have 3 migrant students who are new Americans, and they are enrolled at Avondale Academy. So I think of one's 16, one's 20, and another one is 21. So I think about how their enrollment factors in to these graduation rates. And I have two questions for Dr. Kipp. My first question is in the SPED count, students who are in the gifted program, so they have IEPs. So does that mean anybody with an IEP is included in the SPED disaggregate?
That is an excellent question. No, it is actually just students with, for lack of a better term, disabilities.
Okay, thank you.
And to answer your first part with the migrant kids, we're doing what's right by kids, but we know that those kids are instantly going to be non-graduates once they register with us.
Yes, and I'm so grateful for our district for enrolling these kids and giving them these young adults and giving them hope. So, oh yeah, and then I'm gonna get them graduated. I'm gonna do it. So thank you. Okay, what was my other? Oh yeah, so what do we do for people who are over the age of 21 who want to pursue their high school diploma within TPS? Are there options for them?
Avondale, I believe, well, one year we had an 80-year-old woman who was going back for her high school diploma, so there really is no age limit on getting your high school diploma through Avondale. So
Okay.
I believe we have one in her 40s. So yeah, we welcome all
Okay.
ages.
So if you're over age 21, only Avondale Academy, correct?
At least for our district. I'm sorry, Dr. Anderson, if you had something to add.
No, that's the adult education program that you're referencing, which used to be through New Directions, but we have our own that we started. And that would be the program that they'd go through at Avondale West.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Bowley?
So I know this is a national concern. We're seeing lower numbers of males entering college, lower numbers of males getting further education. And I see we're having that same trend in Topeka Public Schools. Is there anything you can tell me about, are we focusing on our males and what we might have a plan around them to bring them to graduation and, higher education? I don't know what the concern is here, but obviously it's across the nation. So females are out producing or out performing males everywhere.
Right, and Dr. Kipp, I don't know if you want to speak to that. He actually shared that with the board, which is why we bring you the disaggregated by gender. So we are monitoring that and then ensuring that our young men are in our courses that are also challenging and rigorous, and our AP and honors courses. And then we're monitoring, we have a spreadsheet where we monitor each month student by student. And so now we're looking at not only discipline, not only academics, but discipline as well, in terms of young men and their academic proficiency, as well as lack of ensuring that we're not over-identifying young men for discipline issues as well. So we're really looking at that along the spectrum. Dr. Kipp, do you want to speak to that? Because he shared the national data with us some years ago, that's the trend in every state, that young women out-graduate young men. Do you want to add to that, Dr. Kipp?
Well, yeah, it is a national trend. And there's a lot of research that's trying to mitigate that, or to actually better understand why that dynamic exists. I don't really have a answer for you from a national landscape, but here in Topeka Public Schools, yeah, the gap consistently occurs every year. But I guess one could argue that there are more females than males, but that's kind of a weak argument in terms of graduation. But I think it would help to dive into perhaps students of color. Are there particular gaps with males and females? I know Hispanic males and Hispanic females that graduate, there's a wider gap. So I think having that conversation, maybe using the Equity Council as a vehicle to do a study internally and just kind of see where we're at, what we can do to interrupt that.
So, Ms. Foley, this year, one of the items, it's one of the reasons college and career readiness and equity is a pillar for us, both of those for that reason. And graduation rate is listed as one of those areas. So with that, this year we added through the ESSER dollars mentors, and they all are male mentors actually, and there's a reason for that. You have a T-High, Eisenhower, Ross. We have several buildings where we've placed mentors to make sure that they have a role model and an individual to be able to connect with. That's one piece we know is valuable. And then there's some other just relationship building kinds of things that we've put in place, really targeting our young men. So we'll continue to do that, and this will continue to be a topic both for Equity Council and just for teaching and learning and the departments across the board. Thank you for noticing that, and we'll continue to bring those things back. There's an equity report in January or February, and this will be one of the pieces that we'll also be addressing as it relates to that work, including, sadly, the school to prison pipeline, in that currently everyone in the JDC are men. Well, 2 young ladies this past week, but outside of that, they're generally all young men. And there's a correlate with that as well.
Well, I do feel strongly that we have to stop losing these young men. And like you say, that the pipeline has to be disrupted, and it is a problem in our city. So I look forward to seeing what you're able to do about this and what your research shows us that we can move forward on.
And it becomes a we collective impact thing, because no one school district can even do it. And so like today, we had the hiring fair right here in Topeka Public Schools. Every job that we have open in Topeka Public Schools, we hired students. A lot of young men got hired today, and young women, but a lot of young men as a result of that. So these are paid internships in a way, but they're jobs that they can work either in the evening or, part-time during the day. I mean, those are one of those pieces, but this will be, a partnership across the city of Topeka that no school by itself can fix, but collectively we can certainly make an impact.
We need to, right?
Absolutely.
We will.
Thank you, Dr. Kipp. That concludes our presentation.
Okay. That takes us to discussion item, and we have one high school course change recommendations. Mrs. Wallace.
Good evening. I wanted to share with you some of the course change proposals. And this year we do have 4 course changes that we are proposing take effect this year. Usually they are for the next year. The first one is to have weighted grades for our dual language classes at high school. And this is primarily due to the rigor and complexity of moving between 2 languages and recognizing the complexity and difficulty of those courses for students. In alignment with the State Board of Education, adding computer science classes as either a core math or science class. And then that could also take effect this year. Work for credit is a course we've previously had, but it was only open to 12th graders. So the request is to add the work for credit for 11th graders as well. And then to also standardize the number of hours that are required for those credits to 120 hours. And then to add courses to the program of study and weight grades for the National Equity Lab courses. So for example, this semester, we were able to offer computer science through Stanford University, poetry in America from Harvard University, and the modern postmodern from Wesleyan. Next semester, we are able to add introduction to psychology from Georgetown as well. And so to identify those courses on a transcript by name and by university would benefit our students. And then the courses, the other course changes that are listed are course changes for next year's program of study. To add course descriptions for American Sign Language 1 and 2. Last year when we added this course, we did not have an instructor for the course. And now that we do, we felt like we needed to update our course description to be more accurate. And then there are several course description updates for our US history classes, African American history, current social issues, world history, government. Our social science course curriculum and assessment team went through and updated course descriptions to more accurately reflect the content of the classes and to also be culturally sensitive. And then one request to update our prerequisite and change to a graded class, our algebra lab. Currently it's credit, no credit, and did not have a prerequisite. And then an addition of 2 music courses, modern music ensemble and intro to orchestra. And if you have any specific content questions, I believe the consulting teachers for these content areas are on with us.
Proposals back at the very next meeting, asking for action unless there are suggested changes or concerns about any of the changes that the team has suggested thus far.
Dr. Morrison.
Ms. Wallace, I'm curious about work for credit. Could you give an example of that?
Yes, so a lot of our students at some of our high schools that sometimes have to work during the day, that allows them to accrue. They actually bring in their pay stubs, and they can get credit, elective credit, for the time they have spent working during the school day. And that goes to skills and responsibilities for the workplace.
Now, for students that are working at Stormont Vale, for example, that are making the $15 an hour, it would be during their CNA class, for example, that would be a clear alignment. So often that work for credit is aligned with the class and is reviewed and approved by administration. But in cases of a student just using it for elective, that's an option as well in that case as well.
So that all has to be approved through.
It's approved by the building administrator.
Building administration.
That's great. I think that's a good idea. I really do.
How are these classes, Georgetown, Harvard, Stanford, how are they paid for and what are they like? Are they Zoom or what?
So the National Equity Lab is a startup company over the last 2 or 3 years, and they have partnered with some of the Tier 1 universities to allow our at-risk students the opportunity to get college credit through Tier 1 universities at a reduced rate. So you have to be a Title I eligible high school to be able to participate. So not all high schools in Shawnee County can participate in the National Equity Lab courses. And they are a hybrid class. So we have a teacher that supervises, supports, and helps them. And they have some flipped opportunities where they maybe watch videos, do assignments during the day when they're with a teacher from Topeka Public Schools. And then there are Zoom classes in the evening, but periodically, like maybe once every 2 weeks, they might meet with a class that has students from across the country, not just from our area.
And I'd say it's quite rigorous, actually. When you want to know what it's like going to school at Stanford or Harvard. And a couple of students have actually been removed if they aren't able to meet, the level of work required of that university. So that's another piece. And it's about $250, Ms. Wallace?
Correct, for a 3-credit class.
And the students pay for that or
No,
the district does?
No, we've used Title I federal dollars. You are required to be a Title I eligible school, so we're allowed to use Title I federal dollars to help support the tuition.
So it's no cost to the students, which we're excited about. New to us, it's our first year doing this, and it all started right around the time of COVID for, again, an closing equity gap for these universities to come together to offer these kinds of courses to students who might not otherwise be able to access them.
That's exciting. It's no cost to the district either. We have so many students and We get federal dollars for it.
Well, there are grant dollars being used, correct. It's not from the general operating fund, so they're grant dollars, but so in that sense, it's funded through that effort, and again, no cost to students. And even the funding is very minimal.
Could the grant be as big as we need it? Could every student take college English 1 through Harvard?
Again, these are title dollars, and so the title dollars do have a limitation how much grant funds we receive in those dollars. So there's a limitation to that. But students across the district can sign up, and we have about how many students right now, Ms. Wallace?
54. We have 54 students currently from Topeka High and Highland Park. We just recently learned that it's not Title I schools, but Title I eligible schools, which now mean that all of our high schools are eligible to participate.
So we anticipate Topeka West for second semester and into the future. Other questions?
I have one, yes. So does the
Nicholson?
student, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
You first.
A question on the urgency of these first 4, just we're going to do it this semester, so retroactive to the start of the school year, is that your recommendation?
Correct.
Okay. And so the computer science class, you said in agreement with the Kansas Department of Ed recommendation that count as a science or math. I think that's wise, but these others are just, it's our own opinion, or is there some collaborative body that agrees with us that dual language should be a weighted class, or do we determine that, or is somebody else?
Typically, that has been an internal decision among principals. They put forth the recommendations, and many of our honors classes and AP classes are weighted,
Sure.
and that's due to the
Rigor.
difficulty of
Yeah.
rigor of the class.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Stuart Campbell.
Okay, well, now Dr. Mickelson made me think of another question. So weighted, I'm still struggling with this. So I know a Topeka High student who got like an 82% in biología, and Spanish is not the student's first language. So if it's weighted, what does that 82% mean? It's now a 92%?
It's not based on your individual assignments or grades, it's your overall GPA. So on a regular GPA scale, an A is worth 4 points, a B is 3. And in a weighted scale, there's a slightly higher weighting for if you get an A or a B. That's why some students have a weighted GPA that is over a 4.0.
So instead of 4 points, you'd receive more points for an A if your
points for an A.
GPA was that.
Okay, so this child got a B. So but it's going to be 4 points? I'm sorry, I'm not quite getting
A
it.
weighted B is 4 points.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. So, but yeah, had the class been in English, I think this child, it would have been an A because it's harder. Anyway, so thank you for making me think of that, Dr. Mickelson. I wanted some clarification about the Title I eligible. So any student, because initially you said at risk, right? So does the student need to have any of the at-risk criteria in order to participate?
So at risk, but you receive Title I funds, and they call them at risk, but it's entirely based on the free and reduced rate. So to be a Title I eligible school, you must meet 35% of your student population is on free and reduced lunch status. All of our high schools have at least a 35% free and reduced lunch status. Not all of them receive Title I services because we have a limited pot of money and how we deliver that. We have schools, most of our schools are well over 75% that are actually identified as Title I schools.
Okay, so an individual student who's high income, doesn't meet any of those at-risk criterion is still eligible for the National Equity Lab, Stanford, et cetera, classes.
Correct. However, they do encourage us to target the students who would be the free and reduced or at-risk students, but that does not eliminate a student that's more affluent to participate.
Would the more affluent student pay a higher tuition?
No.
No.
Any other questions?
Ms. Bowley?
So are these students vetted somehow to enter this program? I think you said it was individual building administration or the leadership team there that decides if a student is capable of taking on this workload? How are these students chosen, or do they just enroll in it? I'm trying to figure that out.
They have looked at GPA, they've looked at work ethic. They've been encouraged or sought out to enroll in the class. And it is open to all students, but they do encourage kids who are high-performing students to participate because of the rigor.
Similar to your AP and honors classes. So the counselor does the vetting and or pairing up with what classes might be appropriate.
Great. I had one other question. So we have students that are working part of the day and will receive that work credit. How are they gathering their other essential credits that they need for graduation? You know, that they're getting a full education when we do graduate them.
Well, they're only, the number of work for credit credits that they can get is limited. And so it is the opportunity to give them that elective credit, either for the internship type position that they have, or for a student who needs to work during the day to get that elective opportunity. But they are still a full-time student. We have some schools that currently have twilight hours, so students can take classes in the evening as well.
So they have a full regular schedule, but the limited number of elective credits you can get if a student works and instead of that one class, that would suffice.
So once they get past that elective amount of credits that they can get, then that working during the day and taking the twilight hours is not available
They
to
can
them.
still take twilight. I mean, we still, when we started that some years ago, in my experience, you just offer school all day if you can. And if you can offer evening hours and have students go during that time and stagger and staff your school classes accordingly, then we still do that. But being able to use a job for work for credit, if you don't have any other electives, then that might, prevent that. I do think the internships, if there's a press release that's out today from KSDE about Topeka Public Schools specifically partnering with KSDE and the paid internships and externships. So I think that is a gateway for our students in so many ways, as those jobs are all hours of the day and even weekend.
I just wanted to make sure we weren't graduating students that didn't really have all the credits that they needed to do that by just
No.
working.
Yeah, they
So
still
I
take their
think that's
regular schedule.
confusing and wanted to have that cleared up. Thank you.
Thank you. And we appreciate the questions because it's questions parents and others may have. And it comes, through you to us, so it helps clarify that. So the next meeting, we'll be bringing this back for action for the course change proposals, and we thank you for listening this evening.
Thank you. At this time, we have 2 action items. First one being One United Voice platform.
Reverend Williams, if I may say, you've seen the One United Voice platform at the previous meeting, so I didn't speak to it because you've already seen it and there have really been no changes. The picture, we changed our picture from students doing a worksheet kind of item to a kindergartner standing in front of the flag with their graduation cap on to speak to college and career readiness starts at kindergarten, as well as to speak to just a number of things within that particular photo. Diversity and other items. So that's the only change. No language changes. So we just ask for your approval.
Well, we have, okay. It's been moving second. Is there a second? Okay, it's been moving second. Any discussion? Dr. Milkelson.
Just looking at this, I wonder, the statement, our education workforce makes up 65% of the full-time educator workforce in the county. that number seems low to me.
Came from the chamber. We can double check it before we speak to this. We'll be presenting this in December in a couple of weeks, but those numbers, we've never had an economic impact on our legislative agenda, but that came directly from the Greater Topeka Partnership, and the chamber provided those numbers directly.
I suppose if you count preschool teachers, things like that, maybe, but you'd think all 5 school districts in the county would make up 90% of the educator workforce is my guess, but that just, I'd appreciate you double checking. Thank you.
I'll ask Dr. Ray to double check. Thank you.
Any other questions before we, okay, ready for the vote?
Vote is open. All votes are in and the motion carries unanimously.
Okay. This time we're hearing motion for a Native American land acknowledgement.
Mr. President, I move the board approve the Native American land acknowledgement as presented.
Is there a second? Second, any questions?
Yes.
Dr. Bone Break.
Do they want to take over the land? What's their ultimate goal? I don't understand. Even she said this is just a first step. Well, what's the second step?
If I may, Reverend Williams, and I'll turn it over to the board because it's really under your discussion. Meaning first step in terms of the land acknowledgement is just acknowledging that we know that we serve a Native American population and they've had presence here in Topeka. And so acknowledging that. Another step is to make sure that we identify our Native American students and the tribes in which they come from, and being able to have them more involved in the school system and in our communication. I mean,
that really isn't what the proclamation says.
Well, the proclamation is a land acknowledgement. So that's about land and acknowledging that there are Native Americans on this land and we're on this land and they are part of Topeka. That's what the acknowledgement states, similar to the K-State acknowledgement and KU acknowledgement that they also have, acknowledging the land, the Native American contributions in the community. That's one piece. To the response to Mr. Munoz's question about, wondering how can we get to know who are the tribes and who are they in this community? My response to that is that that's another step of making sure that we know all of the individuals, no matter where they live, what community they're in, or that we know who they are, and we're inviting them into Topeka Public Schools to be part of ensuring students succeed and do well. That's a step in terms of that relationship building, and the response was to that.
That's really not what that proclamation asked, though.
The proclamation, well, when you ask the next step, that's what the step is regarding. In terms of a proclamation, again, I'm not sure that I can expound beyond in spirit sharing that we acknowledge the land that we are on. There were Native Americans that contributed to this land that we're on.
But see, that could be a first step to, okay, we have right of first refusal when you sell or oil and mineral rights.
Well, from a legal perspective, as it relates to selling or anything else in that regard, I don't know if Mrs. Cope wants to address that. It's not, there's no legal binding kind of spirit behind that, but I don't know if she wants to address that at all. And then I'll turn it back over to the board to have whatever discussion you deem appropriate regarding the land acknowledgement.
I certainly have not looked into the possibility of that. I would think that it would be certainly very unlikely based on just the acknowledgement that tribes had been on this land previous to us. This is something that other public entities, including school districts, have done around the nation as a way of acknowledgement of the native tribes. So again, I think this is more, I think it was labeled as a proclamation and an acknowledgement, which is exactly what it does. And I don't think there's anything other than just that acknowledgement.
But it's true, right? So they did used to inhabit this land. And so we're just acknowledging that they used to live here. So I think that's what we're trying to to recognize and respect. And I don't think there's anything nefarious about it. It's just, kind of acknowledge that we inhabit land that used to be inhabited by Native Americans.
This was born out of the Equity Council as it came up as, do we have a land acknowledgement and why don't we? So it was born out of that. And so the conversation moved from that to looking at what other entities have done and then acknowledging there are Native Americans in this space. This is also one of those items that a board member may want to vote no to or abstain from, or any of those pieces are also areas that, you may choose to exercise given, the feelings regarding land acknowledgement. And my apologies, I think a board member was about to make a comment, Ms. Boley, and I'll stop there.
I was just going to say that it's basically just a show of respect that we understand and that the land, that many tribes lived here according to the history so far, and that we acknowledge that, and that this is a show of respect and a handout, or putting our hand out in friendship and respect. And that's the way I look at the acknowledgement. They're not asking from the website that Mr. Munoz sent to us, they're not asking to take over our land in any way. Just that we acknowledge that the land was theirs at one time and that we respect it and respect them.
Anyone else? Are we ready for the vote? Okay, ready for the vote, Ms. Lister.
Vote is open.
And the motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. That takes us to board comments. Dr. Bonebright.
Here. Nurses used to make as much, or teachers used to make as much as nurses who average over $60,000 a year. And teachers are the most important factor in educating our greatest natural resource, which is our children. So I would like to go back to somehow expanding the school year, getting the teachers more money, more education. In Europe, as they get experience, they take courses for free, get master's degrees, PhDs. They're, like I told you in the past, I have a niece that takes home take home in Germany more than 60,000 a year. And we have a brain drain in Kansas. And as Thomas Jefferson, I'll paraphrase, a nation that expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization is expecting what never was and never will be. We need to work on more education. We need to get up for the rest of the world, get more education days, and pay our teachers a decent salary. That's all I have.
Thank you. Dr. Morrison.
Yeah, just minimal. To piggyback on what Ms. Boley said, it is concerning the female-male, the gender gap. I mean, we had a racial gap. We do have a gender gap. And I don't know the reason for that, but Peg McCarthy pointed out she went to several assemblies where they gave awards to, and she noticed that most of the awards were going to females. The higher academics were females. So I would, I mean, I'm not going to be on this board very much longer, but the people that continue on this board, I think that is a very good subject and for administration to, if there's ongoing studies nationally looking at this problem, it would be a good project, I think. Thanks.
That may be a DCAC topic to investigate. So briefly, I'm on the calendar committee with Ms. Boley, and the calendar committee's been working recently, and they've, under Ms. Wallace's leadership, the committee consists of school board members, teachers, certified and classified staff, both administrators. And we've come up with 2 proposals that have been sent out to district employees, and they're voting on it now. I think they're due tomorrow. Have over 1,000 people voted so far. And as Wallace said, the voting is pretty close. Usually there's a clear winner, but this time there's evidently not so far. So any teachers listening, you can make your voice heard and vote. Be sure to vote. And I'll be sure to vote for Dr. Bonebrake when he runs for governor or legislator to allocate more money to public education. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Bowley.
I also want to come back and piggyback on the male and female. Somehow, we truly in our district believe in differentiating our instruction to meet needs. And obviously in our education, we're not meeting our male needs. Something that we're doing in education is turning them off or turning them away. So I think a study into this is probably very important, because we have to quit losing those young men that could be our leaders in our future. I wanted to talk about our band instructors this year. Last year, they weren't able to meet. They weren't able to practice their instruments and marching. COVID really disrupted their instruction. And if you were able to make it to any of the football games this year, the band instructors put together bands that marched and played and put on halftime shows that were pretty incredible. And with that in thought, they all lost a year of this instruction, and they were able to pull off a remarkable year this year. And they deserve a lot of respect for that, because Topeka West had parents go out on the field and march with their students, and they didn't even have an instrument. And to watch them try to march in the formation with their students without an instrument helped those parents understand the difficulty in what these students are learning. And so they did an excellent job. I wanted to also bring up the idea of Kansas Can hands out awards to schools across the state of Kansas. They have a high criteria of what is expected for our schools to do. And we received a bronze award for social emotional. It was a level bronze. And I can say that there were only 2 other schools in our area that got more awards than we did. And that was Seaman and Silver Lake. Not Washburn Rural, which many times we're compared to, but Topeka Public Schools. Washburn Rural wasn't on any of those. The Seaman and Silver Lake won many. And so we want to look at how we get more areas like in academics and graduation rate, which sounds like that'll be very difficult for us, but we can still strive for that. And it's another thing that probably the academics piece that help understand our challenges is that Kansas has the highest cut scores in the nation. When we developed our state assessments, it was developed by educators. And they decided to take it into a depth that was meaningful for our students. So when our students perform at a 2, if we would go into Missouri, those students would be above proficient. And so we have to understand that as our educators are teaching, and that they really are doing an excellent job. When our students hit proficient, those students are outperforming around the state. We're outperforming the states around us. And that's important for our teachers to understand and take to heart. And for getting that bronze, it's also good to understand that there's 309 districts in the state of Kansas. And we received that bronze. And we should be very proud of that. I think I'll leave it at that and want to thank Tallgrass Orthopedic and Sports Medicine for the donations that we approved tonight. That was an extremely tremendous gift to our sports programs here in Topeka. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mrs. Stewart Campbell.
I'm excited about all the vaccination clinics that we're hosting for ages 5 to 11 coming up. And so I hope lots of people show up for that so we can get these young kids vaccinated. So thank you, Dr. Anderson and your team for setting up these vaccination clinics. Very important. The other, this is big. Phones. I want to talk about phones and electronic personal devices in our secondary schools. And this is something that is problematic, not just in Topeka Public Schools, but I think there's phone addiction across the entire developed world. So it's certainly not unique to our district, but I would really like to know what is happening at our middle schools and our high schools, what the policy is. And Ms. Cope, she shared with me what our policy is. And so of course I read that, and it was last updated on June 26, 2018. So certainly the pandemic has exacerbated phone addiction. And I would like to hear from secondary principals, counselors, what the usage, how students are using phones during the day, like during instructional time. I know kids are on their phones sometimes, like while teacher is trying to teach. And this is just, it's an issue that I would like to discuss more. And when our policy committee under the leadership of Ms. Cope, when we meet again soon, I think we definitely need to revisit the policy and update it and make sure it's being enforced. So yeah, the cell phone monster. Yeah, I'm bringing it up, but yeah, and here I am. Mine's right here too. So, but I'm paying attention. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Munoz.
See, there's a couple of different things. I've continued my visit of schools in our district since our last meeting. I've visited McCarter, Meadows, Randolph. Tomorrow I'll be visiting Stout, just to get to know the schools. Many of these schools I hadn't been in their buildings, so it was great for me to be able to visit principal, visit some of the teachers, see the students. I think just seeing them learn, I think is gratifying, and doing that safely, I think obviously is of utmost concern for everybody involved in schools. What else? A couple of things. Dr. Bolenberg, you've mentioned a couple of times you want to see longer schools, and I think there's a lot of reasons why it's a tough sell. And I'm with you. I think we need more schooling. It's just where we have to be in order to be competitive in this new world we are. But I want you to consider that if that's a real tough to do, that a alternative until we get to that point might be looking at our summer enrichment program. It's been growing, and it's one way to get towards what we want, which is continuing kids to learning, having them engaged, and providing enrichment opportunities. And so I'll keep with you. I'd love to sort of keep in a dialogue with you to see is that as one way toward that bigger purpose that we all have, which is preparing our kids as best as we can. And I think there's an opportunity there. And so, and I think it would help us, moving on to another topic of gender gap. I think it would help us to be curious about why it is. I think data with Mr. Kipp studying this some might help us some. Perhaps a DCAC might help to provide some insight into to what might be one explanation, one interpretation for this gap. But I also think it can't just be our teachers and our administration I think they are a big part of the answer. And if there are things that need adjustment in terms of policy within 501, we should definitely be looking at that. But I also think it has to do that males in our community, whether it's at home, whether it's in our churches, our communities, I think males in our communities play a big part and are definitely a big part of the answer. And so we have to figure out if we can get some insight from Dr. Kipp and perhaps DCAC, and just talking with some of these kids, I think might help us to figure out what might be some concrete steps we can take. And again, I think many of our educators are doing a phenomenal job, and they probably can't do it all by themselves. And we're going to need some help probably from others who we haven't yet engaged up to this point. So let's take a look here. And yeah, I think that's it for me. I'm look forward to continuing to visit other schools. There has been some talk recently about other districts who have made some adjustments to the calendar and what it looks like for educators. And I think first of all, I want to acknowledge that it's incredibly difficult situation to be able to teach under the pressures that teachers find themselves in. And so I would acknowledge, how impossibly hard it is that they're working during this sort of COVID era. I'd be interested to figure out, other schools have made some adjustments. Are there some adjustments that we could make to sort of, help with the calendar year? I know we're voting on a calendar right now, but if other schools are making some adjustments, I don't want to follow what other schools are doing, but I do want to look at it, see is there anything that we can do to sort of help educators given the circumstances they find themselves in. So I don't know how that might begin, but at least having a conversation is a start. That is all for me.
Okay. Thank you. Just words of wisdom as it relates to the gender gap in terms of academic progress. I'm a firm believer in intentionality. And I believe that if a man intentionally invests his time in the life of a young man, you'll reap the dividends later on. This past Monday, I spoke at Eisenhower Middle School. Mr. Gardner over there has started a young men's group. You have to raise their level of expectations, but they also need to know that you care. And if they know that you care, they want to make you look good while making themselves look good. And that's all it takes. Just one person reaching one and holding their hand and guiding them and be genuine in what you're doing. It'll reap dividends, and you'll start seeing young men achieving. There's a gentleman, I think Dr. Anderson knows, Principal Cavale. He took over the lowest performing high school in New Jersey. Young man was a freshman, gangbanger. By the time he became a senior, he was student body president and got a 4-year full scholarship. So it is possible, but all it takes is time. And you'll see the results, but it only takes one to reach one. And with that, any other business for the good of the cause? Well, enjoyed it. We are dismissed.